The knock came every morning at exactly 6:30, soft, gentle, like a child who didn't want to disturb too much. At first, the human thought it was a mistake, maybe some lost animal tapping at the wood. But when he opened the door that first morning, he saw her, a small alien girl, thin arms, gray skin faintly blue, large eyes that shimmered like silver rain. She looked up at him with a blank face and said one word, "Daddy." He froze, blinked, looked behind her. There was no one, only dust blowing across the farmland. "I'm not your father," he said, slowly. The girl didn't argue, didn't cry. She sat down on the porch and waited. After an hour, she stood and walked away. Silent. The next morning, the same thing happened, every single day, for 3 years. Rain or shine, winter or heat, she came at 6:30, said Daddy, and waited. He stopped trying to send her away. He let her sit by the porch, let her pet his old dog Rust. He even left out warm food and a blanket during the cold months, but she never came inside, never asked for more than that word. Sometimes she whispered strange words at the sky. Sometimes she stared at his fields like she remembered something painful. But she never left for good, never missed a single day. The farmer, named Hal, lived alone. He had no family, no kids, and a past he didn't like to talk about. He fought in the alien-human conflict 15 years ago. He thought the war was over, the soldiers forgotten. But something about the girl made those memories crawl back. He asked around the colony. No one had seen her arrive. No records, no ship logs. He even called the border officers, but they didn't come. 3 days later, the girl didn't show up. Hal felt something strange, like guilt. On the 4th day, she returned, limping. Bruises on her small arms, a tear in her strange dress. He didn't ask what happened. He just gave her food and a soft chair. That night, he couldn't sleep. The next day, he left a chair and a cup of tea waiting. The girl gave a tiny nod, sat down, and said nothing. She started drawing things in the dirt with her finger. Symbols, circles, stars, lines that didn't make sense. But they reminded Hal of the war maps he used to study. One symbol she drew again and again caught his attention. It was a spiral, broken in the center, with lines pointing outward. It was the same design that had been painted on the walls of the alien labs he saw during Operation Firefall. He asked her where she saw it. She said nothing, only looked up at the sky. That night, Hal had a dream. He stood in fire, smoke around him, soldiers shouting. He turned to see a lab filled with glowing tanks. Inside one of them, a small figure floated. It looked just like her when he woke. Sweat on his forehead, he went outside. The girl was already sitting there, before he said anything. She pointed to the forest line near the edge of the farm. Without a word, Hal picked up a flashlight and walked into the trees. The dog followed close behind, the girl walking silently beside him. They walked until they reached a patch of earth that felt wrong, too smooth, too flat. She pointed again. Hal dropped to his knees and began to dig. The soil was soft, almost like it had been turned recently. After a few minutes, something metallic peeked through the dirt. It was curved, burnt, and glowing faintly blue. Hal dug faster, revealing the side of a small alien pod, cracked glass, wires torn. Inside was a child's seat, empty but with straps burned and curled. Hal looked at the girl. She didn't cry. She simply touched the glass, closed her eyes, and whispered something in a language he had never heard. Then she turned back toward the house and said softly, "Daddy," and for the first time, Hal didn't say no. That night, the wind howled louder than usual. Across the empty farmland, the sky was darker than black, as if the stars themselves were hiding behind something thick and heavy. Hal sat on the porch with the girl wrapped in a worn blanket beside him. She hadn't spoken since they found the broken pod in the woods. But her eyes were locked on the sky, as if she was waiting for something to return. Rust. The old dog laid at their feet, tail twitching nervously. Hal lit his last lantern and placed it near the steps. Its light flickered, as if afraid of what it saw. The girl whispered one word under her. Breath Hell couldn't understand it, but he felt it in his chest. It didn't sound like a name, it sounded like a warning. He asked her again where she came from. She only tilted her head and pointed upward from above, she finally said, then looked away like she had said too much. Hal went inside and brought out an old box. He opened it slowly, revealing pieces of a past he tried to bury: dog tags, a soldier's badge, a blood-stained photo of his old unit. On the back was a symbol, the same spiral she drew in the dirt with her finger. He showed it to her. She stared at it and nodded slowly. "This is who made me," she said. Her voice was flat, but her hands trembled under the blanket. Oh. Didn't know what that meant, but he felt something shift in his gut. This girl was not lost. She had been sent, or worse, she had escaped around midnight. The sky turned red. But a flashing, violent red, like an emergency light, stretched across the stars. It lasted only 5 seconds. Long enough for Hal to drop his lantern. Long enough for every bird in the woods to scream and flee. Long enough for the girl to whisper, "They found me." He stood up, grabbed his old rifle, and scanned the horizon. Nothing moved, but everything felt wrong. The girl didn't cry. She only reached for the dog and held him tight. The next morning, Hal went into town. He asked about the red flash. Nobody else saw it. They thought he was seeing things again. Old war nerves acting up. Only one man said something strange. The bartender at the Outpost bar leaned over and said, "You know they erased crash reports from this whole region 10 years ago, right?" Hal froze. Why, he asked the bartender. Just laughed. "Ask the stars, not me." Hal drove back home with a knot in his chest. When he reached his gate, he saw something that made him slam the brakes. The same spiral symbol was carved into his barn door. It hadn't been there yesterday. He walked around the property with the girl close. Behind, he found no footprints, no engines, no tire marks, only that perfect spiral. That night, Hal didn't sleep. He sat in the old chair with a rifle across his lap. The girl sat near the fire, not blinking, not speaking. The wind rattled the windows, and in the distance, something metallic clicked not once, but 3 times, slow, deliberate. The dog growled, low and steady. Hal stepped onto the porch, heart pounding. The wind blew dust across the fields, but there was something else: movement near the tree line. A shadow, too smooth, too tall, too still. He raised the rifle and aimed, but the figure didn't move, didn't flinch. Then suddenly it was gone, vanished into the dark. The girl stepped forward, her eyes glowing faint blue in the night. She whispered something again in that strange language, and the ground beneath her pulsed just for a second, as if the earth itself was listening. Hal lowered the rifle and turned to her. "What are they?" he asked. She looked up at him and said, "They are not here to find me. They are here to erase me, and anyone who stands near me." Hal felt the cold settle in his bones, the kind of cold that doesn't come from wind, but from knowing something ancient is waking. And for the first time in years, he knew war had found him again. The morning was heavy with silence. Even the wind seemed to pause at the edge of the porch. The alien girl sat where she always did, wrapped in the blanket Hal had left for her. She stared at the horizon without blinking, like she was listening to a sound no one else could hear. Hal stood in the doorway, watching her. His rifle now rested beside the rocking chair. Like an old habit returned, he wanted to ask her again, wanted to know what her name was, but something always stopped him. Every time he asked, she would go still, her small hands would tighten. Her eyes would darken, and she would walk away into the fields without a word. So he stopped asking. He started talking about other things. Instead, simple things. Like planting rows of corn, or why the well needed fixing, or how Rust used to chase squirrels before his back legs got weak. She listened. Sometimes she even smiled. But she never answered with more than 1 or 2 words, and never once said her name. One afternoon, she was drawing again. Circles, lines, patterns that made no sense. Hal sat beside her and just watched. Suddenly, she looked up. "You used to wear silver armor," she said. Hal blinked. He hadn't told her that. Not in detail, not ever. "That's what I saw in the tank," she added. Hal's breath caught in his throat. "What tank?" he asked. She didn't reply. She kept drawing. But now the lines were thicker, more frantic. She carved a perfect map of the night sky into the dirt, but the stars were not from Earth's sky. Hal recognized a few. From his old mission's distant sectors, places they barely escaped classified locations. "How do you know this?" he asked. The girl finally looked at him. "I don't know," she whispered, "but they're inside me, memories that are not mine." He wanted to believe she was just a lost child. Some survivor, but her knowledge, her silence, her pain all told him something darker. She walked to the barn and placed her hand against the spiral symbol still etched into the wood. The door creaked open by itself. Hal had locked it the night before. She stepped inside. Hal followed slowly inside. She went to the corner where his old army crates were stacked. She didn't touch anything. She just stared. "This is where it started for me," she said. Hal shook his head. "You've never been here before." She turned and whispered, "Not in this life." Suddenly, a sharp noise cut through the air, like a blade scraping metal. Hal rushed outside. A sleek object floated above the field, black, silent, scanning with a faint red light. The girl walked right up to it. No fear, no hesitation. She raised her hand, and the drone stopped mid-air, frozen. Then she said something in that ancient language again. The drone sparked, trembled, and dropped to the ground without a sound. Completely dead, Hal stared at her, his voice low. "What are you?" The girl looked at him with sad eyes. "I don't know what they made me." She stepped closer. "But I know you were there. Your voice was the first I heard. That's why I waited every morning, because I remember that voice calling me back, saying everything would be okay, and I believed it." Hal's knees felt weak. He sat on the porch, unable to speak. The girl placed her hand on his shoulder. "I don't need you to be my father," she said. "I just need someone who won't leave me outside." He nodded, slow, unsure, but something inside him cracked open, a place he'd buried with old medals and memories of fallen brothers. Later that night, as stars blinked back into view, she sat beside him again. Still without a name, but no longer without a place, and Hal finally understood. That maybe, just maybe, she had been waiting for the man he used to be to come back to the door and let her in. The sun had not yet risen when Hal woke to the sound of clicking. It wasn't the usual creak of the barn or the groan of the old windmill. This was sharper, metal against metal. Precise, like something was moving in a pattern. He grabbed the rifle from beside his bed and moved quietly to the window. The fields were still, but his instincts screamed that something was wrong. Rust growled low near the porch door. The girl was already sitting in the hallway. Eyes wide, not afraid, just alert, like she had been waiting for it. "They've come," she whispered. Without looking up, Hal's breath caught. He stepped outside, scanning the edge of the field. At first, there was nothing. Then something shimmered near the tree line. Almost invisible, but moving. He raised the rifle. The shimmer vanished. Gone like smoke, but he knew he hadn't imagined it. He had seen cloaking tech like that once, long ago. During a mission he wasn't supposed to survive. The girl stepped beside him, barefoot on the cold wood. "They're scouts." She said they marked the target first, then the others come later. Hal didn't ask how she knew. He just nodded and locked the gate for the first time in years. He unsealed the cellar beneath the barn. Dust rose as the metal hatch creaked open. Inside were crates, old tech batteries, shield parts. Even a few grenades packed in foam. The girl stood silently watching as he laid the weapons on the table. She placed her hand over one of the batteries, and it lit up instantly. Hal blinked. He had been trying to get that one working for years. "How did you do that?" he asked. She shrugged. "It listens when I speak in the old tongue." Hal didn't know what that meant, but it didn't matter now. They had no time. He started building traps around the farm. Motion wires, heat sensors, flash bombs set to trigger near the barn's perimeter. The girl followed him wordlessly, placing strange symbols on certain trees and fence posts. She said they would confuse machines that tried to track her. As night fell, the air grew heavy. No wind, no birds, just silence and the feeling of something watching from the dark. Then came the hum, low, buzzing through the ground. Like engines buried beneath the soil, Hal stood at the porch, rifle ready. The girl stayed close to the fire, eyes closed, whispering again in that forgotten language. Without warning, a dart zipped past Hal's head and buried itself in the wall. He ducked, fired toward the tree line. A flicker of movement, vanished again. Then more darts, more shadows, then shapes began appearing, figures in black armor, tall, fast, unnatural. They didn't speak, didn't hesitate. They moved like they already knew the layout of the land. Hal triggered the first trap. An explosion of light and sound shook the night. One figure dropped, another spun, and retreated into the dark. But more came to many. They moved like hunters, silent, efficient. They weren't here to talk, they were here to take the girl. Rust leaped into one of them, snarling with all the strength left in his old bones. Hal fired again and again, but they were closing in. The girl stood up slowly, eyes glowing, hands raised. She whispered louder now. The fire behind her turned blue, and the ground cracked beneath her feet. The hunters stopped. Just for a second. Just enough for Hal to see fear in their body language. The girl stepped forward, the wind rose like a scream. And then everything exploded in light. When the dust cleared, the field was empty. No sign of the hunters, only scorched marks on the ground, and silence once more. Hal stood, breathing hard. The girl walked back to the porch, sat down and whispered, "They will return, but next time." "They won't come quietly," Hal nodded. He knew now this wasn't just about one lost girl. It was about a war that never ended, and he was standing right in the middle of it again. Hal didn't sleep for 2 nights after the attack. The traps were reset, the barn was reinforced, and the rifle never left his side. But the real storm wasn't outside anymore. It was inside the girl. She moved differently now, less like a child. More like someone waiting for the truth to be accepted. Her eyes no longer scanned the trees for danger. They searched Hal's face. Like she was hoping he'd remember something. He finally asked her again, not about her name, but who made her. She didn't look away this time. She didn't freeze or run into the field. She simply sat down and told him everything. "I wasn't born," she said. "I was made. I wasn't meant to survive, but I did." And they hate that Hal felt a knot in his chest. He listened as she told him about a lab floating near the war front. Not on Earth, not on Arctur, but hidden between the stars, a black site, where human and alien DNA were blended to create something new. Something that could survive any world, something that could pass as either, or both, or neither. "They used your voice," she said, "during the early tests, to calm us down, to guide us. They took your recordings from the battlefield. Your orders, your commands, your comfort." Hal couldn't believe it. His voice used as a father's tone to shape an entire generation of secret experiments. He had never known, never signed anything, never allowed it. "You were my anchor," she whispered. "When I escaped, I followed the sound of your voice. Through memory, through stars, until I found you." Hal sat down hard on the porch. The truth slammed into him like a fist. He wasn't her father, but he was still responsible in some twisted way. He was the reason she existed. And the reason she was hunted. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a small scar glowing faint blue. Hal leaned closer. Embedded under her skin was a tiny device. It blinked steady, rhythmic. "A tracker. It activates every cycle," she said. "They know where I am. Even if I run, even if I hide." Hal stood, stormed to the barn, pulled out his old toolkit. He returned with cutters, a scanner, and a bottle of pain suppressant. "We're removing it now," he said. She didn't flinch. She nodded once and sat still. Hal worked quickly, hands steady, heart pounding. The moment the tracker came out, the glow under her skin faded. He crushed it beneath his boot, then tossed the pieces into the fire. The girl exhaled a long breath. Like she had been holding it for years. For the first time she smiled. Not a small one, a full smile, soft and sad. "At the same time, they'll still come," she said. "But now, at least they won't track me like an animal." Hal didn't reply. He walked to the edge of the field, looked at the stars. So many secrets were buried in that sky. He had thought the war ended, but it never did. It just changed shape. He returned and sat beside her. He didn't ask more questions, not yet. She leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered something strange. "I wasn't the only one." Hal's jaw tightened. "How many like you?" he asked. She closed her eyes. "Dozens, maybe more, but most didn't survive, and some were taken back, turned into weapons." That night Hal sat awake, thinking about duty, about guilt, about second chances. He had buried friends in foreign soil, fought monsters on planets with no names, but nothing had shaken him like this small girl, who only ever wanted to be seen, and now he finally did. The wind carried no sound that morning. Only dust rolled across the field like warning whispers from the earth. Hal stood at the edge of his land, staring at the empty sky, but he knew it wouldn't stay empty for long. They were coming, he didn't know when, but his bones felt it the same way he used to feel air pressure before an ambush back in the war. This time, he wouldn't be retreating, he would be waiting. The girl helped him without needing instructions. She knew the land like it was her own. She marked zones with strange alien runes, each one carefully placed to confuse sensors, to distort signals, to block psychic links if any of the hunters used them. Hal opened every crate in the cellar, unsealed weapons marked as unstable, rewired explosives with trembling fingers, built turrets from scrap, and programmed old drones to follow the pattern of his dog. Rusts sent a moving decoy, simple but smart. They set traps in the cornfield, built blind spots near the creek, and camouflaged heat packs to simulate body movement. If they came in stealth, they would meet chaos. The girl remained calm, but her eyes burned brighter each day, a glow hidden behind her silence. Sometimes Hal caught her standing near the fire, whispering names. Names of other children, other test subjects, some who didn't make it, some who might still be locked away. "You don't have to fight for me," she told him once, but Hal only shook his head. "I ain't fighting for you," he said. "I'm fighting because no one should be hunted for being born." That night they ate dinner under the stars like soldiers before a final battle. The dog lay quietly beside them. The girl braided a strand of bluegrass between her fingers. The wind shifted, and that was when Hal knew. He felt it in the dirt. In the change of air pressure, something massive moved above them, but it made no sound. Hal walked to the barn, pressed a switch hidden in the wall. A tower unfolded from the roof, and a silent scanner came to life. He watched the signal blink. 3 ships cloaked, triangular, descending slow and wide like birds of prey. He grabbed his rifle, checked the traps one last time. The girl placed her hand on the porch rail. It glowed faintly. Power ran through the wood, through the ground, activating something beneath the surface. She had done something, connected something to the land. She turned to Hal. "When the first one steps on the soil, the others will feel it. But they won't understand it. They'll think it's just your trap. They won't know it's mine too." The lights in the distance flickered. A low hum reached the edge of hearing, not sound, but pressure like gravity was holding its breath. Then came the drop, silent pods falling from the dark, 12 of them. Perfect formation. They didn't hit the ground hard. They landed like ghosts. Hal took position near the tractor, a remote detonator in one hand, rifle in the other. He watched through the scope, waited for movement. The first figure emerged, tall, armor like black glass, no face. Just a single red slit across the helmet. The moment its foot touched the soil, a surge of light pulsed under the ground. The figure froze, tried to move, but roots, real roots, twisted from the earth and wrapped around its legs, pulling it down like the land itself wanted revenge. Hal hit the detonator. The field exploded with fire. 3 more figures went down. The rest spread out fast, but not fast enough. Turrets came alive, spinning, firing traps, snapped ropes, launched metal shards, tore through the air. But the enemy adapted. They moved like water, shifted formation, and began surrounding the barn. That's when the girl stepped forward, her eyes brighter than the stars, her voice louder than wind. She raised both hands, and the sky responded, a pulse so powerful it shook the clouds. Every enemy sensor blinked out. Ships above wobbled and fell into retreat. They left the ground, but they didn't take her. Hal stood in the center of smoke, his face covered in ash, his hands still gripping the rifle. The girl walked back to the porch and sat down like it was just another morning. Hal looked at her and knew the war wasn't over. But she had just won the first battle. Smoke still hung in the air like a ghost that refused to leave. The field was scorched. The traps were empty. The enemy was gone, but Hal stood frozen on the porch like the battle was still happening inside his bones. The girl sat quietly beside the old dog Rust. She was brushing his fur. Her hands calm, but her eyes were tired, like someone far older than her frame. She hadn't spoken since the sky lit up, since her power pushed the Empire back. Hal's grip loosened around the rifle. His arms ached. His back screamed, but his heart felt lighter. He looked at the field where a dozen alien soldiers had vanished in smoke. He had seen many victories in his time, but none that felt like this. He stepped inside, made 2 cups of warm tea, and returned to the porch. The girl took the cup without a word. They sat together in silence, the kind of silence that felt safe. For 3 years, she had knocked at his door every morning, always the same word, Daddy. He never understood why not until now. She had been searching not just for shelter, not just for safety, but for a place where someone would fight for her, not because they had to, but because they chose to. Hal looked over at her. Her legs were swinging slightly off the edge of the porch, just like a normal child, but he knew better now. She wasn't just a child. She was a memory of a war, a secret carried by stars, a spark they tried to erase. She looked up at him. "Will you send me away now?" she asked softly. Hal shook his head. "You're already home," he said. Her lips curved into the smallest smile, not wide, not loud, but it was real. She stood and walked toward the barn. Hal followed. She knelt down and placed her hand on the old dirt floor. A symbol glowed faintly, the same spiral, but this time it pulsed warm like a heartbeat. "This was the last one," she whispered. "They won't try again. Not here. Not for a while." Hal didn't ask how she knew. He didn't need to. He trusted her now more than he trusted most humans he served with. They spent the next few days rebuilding, fixing broken walls, burying fragments of the fallen machines. Hal wrote nothing down, left no trace for others to find. This story was not for reports. It was for the porch, for quiet mornings, for safety that didn't need proof. The girl started sleeping inside, not just near the fire, but in the small guest room down the hall. Rust followed her every night. As if guarding something precious, Hal would wake up early, make breakfast, and without fail, she'd come out and say, "Morning, Daddy," not with confusion, not with fear, but with joy, like the word finally belonged to her. He didn't correct her, not anymore. It didn't matter where she came from or what the Empire wanted. She was his now. His responsibility, his second chance. Sometimes he still dreamed of fire, of broken labs, of blood, but now the dreams ended, with her voice calling him back. Months passed. The land healed, the stars moved on, and life found a rhythm again. One morning, a knock came at the door just like before. But this time it wasn't her. It was a woman, frightened, carrying a small alien boy in her arms. She looked around like she was being followed. Hal opened the door slowly. The girl stood beside him, eyes wide, not in fear, but in recognition. The woman looked at her, then at Hal, and whispered, "They told me you'd protect us. They said this is where the door always opens." Hal stepped aside and nodded once, because he knew now. The fight may never truly end, but as long as his door stayed open, no child would ever be left waiting in the cold again.